the issue with Mike Vrabel and Diana Russini that people might be familiar with if you're football fans, because it's been everywhere in the news. I don't really care to discuss the nature of their relationship or anything. I don't really think that's much of my business anyway.
And what do we really know about it?
Exactly. And as Shayne pointed out before the show, you got to be aware that AI is very prominent now, and you don't know what's what as far as pictures go and all of those kinds of things. But it did make me think of the journalism as a whole and how that is kind of an interesting relationship when you have these beat reporters and journalists that are in the locker rooms and basically have free access to the locker rooms. And I wanted to explore your perspective of that, Shayne, because it has to be kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, that's a locker room. You've been very forward about the fact that you don't necessarily, some of those things that are in the locker room stay in the locker room. Mm-hmm. I guess unless there's a reporter in there, then it doesn't necessarily stay in there.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a real tricky situation that actually carries a double-edged sword. And so what I'll say by that is I had never, I'm not going to say what team it was with, but there was just a younger, attractive female in the locker room while all the men are changing clothes and they getting interviewed while they have a towel wrapped around them, or some guys are half dressing and as other people are being interviewed. We'd never see that in the WNBA, where men are walking through the locker room. I don't know if they've made that rule or not. I have no idea if they even have open locker room time as they do for some of the male sports. But what that does is it brings forward an issue of even consensual dating, right? Like, what if that girl makes an advance to one of the guys or reaches out in his DMs and says something to him? Okay, more than likely the guy's going to be like, hey, sure, cool, let's hang out. But what if the guy reaches out to her, and we've seen that, okay, and let's say she's not into it. All of a sudden, that's a harassment case. That's something going on in a very bad spirit of light optic look, and I think we saw that with Brett Favre. I think we've heard of it in other situations, but what if that other person reaches out and someone's receptive to it? That creates a whole nother dynamic that creates an issue, which is part of the reason why they have rules within the organization about, non-fraternizing with females and males and things like that. But now you've got reporters in there and, what if a man who is single and wanted to advance an invitation to someone, respectfully, how is that going to be viewed by the outside world? And if it happens the other way, how is it viewed by the outside world? And then when you hear about these things that happen with coaches and people that are, married or whatever, I think you have to respect human nature, that certain things are going to happen if the opportunities are there, but also you have to hope that people have enough willpower not to do certain things. But, I think you're asking for trouble. But then how is it fair to say, well, they can come in a locker room and you have the same job as them, but you can't go in there? So it's a double edge. Like I can see both sides of it, but I think it's asking for trouble.
That's why I wanted to ask about it, because there are a lot of layers to it as a whole. Like you said, these are adults. Everybody's adults, and you're going to have, if you have two single adults, then it's not uncommon to date in your workplace. When I used to work in intelligence, that was very common, because it was like, okay, if you date outside of this, you can't really share much of your life like you would with a normal partner. If you work in intelligence, you can't come home and say, well, what did you do today? Sorry, that's been redacted. I can't tell you. It's not going to go over well with your spouse if that's how you have to deal with everyday life. In the NFL and in these sports, there's not necessarily the same kind of structure, as far as, obviously, all your coworkers, outside of maybe there's some female coaches now and stuff, but all your coworkers primarily are men. So there might be some other positions that you kind of work with that may be female, but yeah, it can be problematic. But when I saw that headline, that's what it made me more think of, because again, I don't care for the for the gossip stuff,
Yeah,
the Page
for
Six,
sure.
the TMZ. Apparently, TMZ turned that story down, so that's kind of, you got to keep that in mind. If TMZ's turning that one down, then you got to think twice about it. But it is an interesting dynamic, and I'm curious how it's kind of evolved too. Did you see the evolution of it when you were on the coaching side of things? Like, has it evolved much over, like, since you were playing until now, because of maybe some of these things that we're talking about?
I don't really know. I didn't really have access to a lot of the media interaction
Right.
with the players. The only time I ever saw the media was on the field.
Okay.
Because we were never really in the locker room, and college sports doesn't have open locker room where
Right.
the reporters can come into the locker room. They usually have a kind of a press conference room set up where the stars of the game are asked to come in and give interviews there, or it's out in the hallway or something after the game.
Sure.
I don't really think there is an open locker room policy for college football that I can remember.
Yeah, that would be even more.
But even at that, the
problematic,
coaches were
I
in a
guess.
different locker room, so I wouldn't
Right.
have seen it either way. And then other than that, I never paid attention to it because I was usually running off the field to get back in the locker room as fast as I could, so I could start my work, so I could try to go home as fast as I could.
Right. Right. Yeah, it is an interesting scenario, but I thought worth the conversation because all these things are more nuanced than people give. Would they just see the headline of, okay, well, Russini and Vrabel and what's their relationship? But I think it's good to understand what the nuance and what the interaction is with all these folks because, yeah, I mean, there's probably some of these things that are going on, like Shayne's saying, without outside knowledge, but nowadays it's harder to do that because everything is very highly publicized. They were at a resort, so people took pictures and sold those to outfits that are paying 5-6 digits for things like this, which is an amazing statistic, but it's true. But yeah, I'm glad we had the conversation in a more nuanced way than just talking about the relationship or what have you. But